Stop right there. You can't enter this facility. The young guard's voice cut through the morning air as an elderly man in worn jeans and a faded jacket approached the military base entrance. The old man stood quietly, hands in his pockets, saying nothing as the guard blocked his path. This is a restricted military zone. You need proper authorization and identification. The elderly man reached slowly into his jacket. I have my ID right here, son. The guard barely glanced at it. Sir, this gate is for authorized personnel only. You need to turn around. If you believe respect should be given to those who served, comment respect below. Arthur Brooks had spent 42 years in the United States Army. He had commanded troops in 3 different conflicts, received the Distinguished Service Cross, and mentored hundreds of young officers who now held positions throughout the military. But on this quiet Tuesday morning, dressed in civilian clothes to attend a private ceremony honoring fallen soldiers, he looked like any other 73-year-old man. His silver hair was thinning, his face deeply lined, and his clothes were simple and unremarkable. He preferred it that way. After retiring 5 years ago, Arthur had deliberately stepped away from the spotlight, choosing to live modestly in a small house near the base where he had spent his final years of service. He rarely wore his uniform anymore, rarely spoke of his accomplishments, and rarely used his rank. Today, he had come to pay respects at a memorial dedication, arriving early to avoid attention. He just wanted to honor his fallen comrades in peace. The guard, Private Marcus Chen, was 22 years old and had been stationed at this gate for only 3 months. He was diligent, perhaps overly so, and determined to prove himself worthy of his position. When he saw the elderly man approaching on foot, no vehicle, no escort, no visible credentials, his training kicked in automatically. This was a high-security installation. Protocols existed for a reason. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the area, Marcus said firmly, his hand resting on his radio. You're not authorized to be here. Arthur nodded slowly, his expression patient. I understand you're doing your job, Private, but if you look at that identification card, you'll see I have clearance. Marcus glanced down at the card again, this time actually reading it. His eyes scanned the name, but the significance didn't register. Arthur Brooks. It was just a name. This doesn't show active duty status, Marcus said, handing the card back. Retired personnel need to go through the visitor center and obtain a temporary pass. You can't just walk onto the base. Arthur's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained calm. Son, I've walked onto this base more times than you've been alive. I'm here for the memorial ceremony at 1000 hours. Colonel Patterson is expecting me. Marcus crossed his arms. Then, Colonel Patterson can come down here and escort you through proper channels. Until then, you need to step back behind that yellow line. A few other soldiers passing by had begun to notice the confrontation. Some glanced over curiously, others kept walking, assuming it was just another civilian who had gotten lost or confused. Arthur stood his ground, not aggressively, but with a quiet dignity that came from decades of command. Private, I'm asking you respectfully to call the colonel's office. Tell them General Arthur Brooks is at the East Gate. Marcus's expression hardened. Sir, I don't know who you think you are, but you can't just claim to be a general and expect me to let you through. That's impersonating an officer, which is a federal offense. Now please, leave before I have to call military police. The words hung in the air like a physical weight. Arthur felt a familiar weariness settle over him, the kind that came not from physical exhaustion, but from the burden of being invisible, of having his entire life's service reduced to nothing more than the appearance of an ordinary old man in ordinary clothes. He had faced enemy fire, made life-and-death decisions, carried wounded soldiers through hostile territory, and spent sleepless nights worrying about the men and women under his command. And now, he couldn't even enter the base he had once commanded to honor the dead. I understand, Arthur said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. I understand you're following protocol, but I'm telling you the truth. Please, just make the call. Marcus shook his head, reaching for his radio. I'm calling MP. You need to leave, now. Just as Marcus pressed the button on his radio, a vehicle approached from inside the base, a black sedan with small flags mounted on the front. It slowed as it neared the gate, and the driver, a young sergeant, looked out the window. Her eyes widened the moment she saw the elderly man standing there. Sergeant Linda Martinez had been General Brooks's aide during his final 2 years of active duty. She had watched him lead with compassion and strength, had seen him comfort grieving families, had witnessed him make impossible decisions with unwavering resolve. She practically leaped from the vehicle before it had fully stopped. "General Brooks," she called out, her voice sharp with alarm and confusion. She strode quickly toward the gate, her eyes moving from Arthur to the young private. "Private Chen, what's going on here?" Marcus straightened immediately, recognizing a superior officer. "Sergeant, this civilian was attempting to enter the base without proper authorization. He was claiming to be a general, and I was about to call MP." Linda's face went pale, then flushed red. "Claiming to be?" Her voice rose slightly. "Private, you're standing in front of General Arthur Brooks, retired commanding general of this entire installation. He has more authority to be on this base than you, me, or anyone else currently stationed here." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His eyes darted back to Arthur, seeing him now as if for the first time. The transformation in Marcus's demeanor was instant and total. His face drained of color, his shoulders straightened reflexively, and his hand came up in a sharp salute that trembled slightly. "General, I didn't... Sir, I apologize. I should have..." His voice cracked, thick with shame and horror at what he had done. Arthur returned the salute with the practiced ease of decades, then lowered his hand gently. "At ease, Private. You were doing your job." But Linda wasn't ready to let it go. Doing his job? "General, with all due respect, this young man was about to have you arrested. He refused to verify your credentials, refused to make a simple phone call." She turned back to Marcus, her voice firm but not unkind. "Private Chen, do you understand what just happened here? This man has the Medal of Honor. He commanded operations that saved thousands of lives. He built half the protocols you were just trying to enforce, and you treated him like a trespasser." Marcus looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. "Sir, I have no excuse. I was wrong. I should have listened. I should have verified. You didn't look like... He trailed off, realizing how terrible that sounded. Arthur stepped forward, his expression softening. "I didn't look like a general. That's what you mean, isn't it?" He gestured to his worn clothing, his casual appearance. "You're right. I don't. I look like an old man who might have wandered off from somewhere. And in your position, with limited experience, you made a judgment call based on what you saw." He paused, letting the words settle. "But here's what I need you to understand, Private. Every person who approaches that gate has a story. Some of them might be veterans who served before you were born. Some of them might be family members of fallen soldiers, carrying grief you can't imagine. Some of them might be civilians who support this military in ways you'll never see. Your job isn't just to enforce rules, it's to do so with respect and wisdom. When someone tells you they're supposed to be here, when they provide identification, when they ask you to make a simple verification call, you do it. Not because you trust them automatically, but because dignity costs you nothing, and ignorance costs everyone something." Marcus's eyes were wet now, his voice thick. "Yes, sir. I understand, sir. It won't happen again." Linda had made a quick call on her radio, and within minutes, 3 more vehicles had arrived. Colonel Patterson himself emerged from one, his face a mixture of relief at finding Arthur and fury at what had occurred. Other officers gathered, word spreading quickly through the nearby buildings. Several of them had served under Brooks, and their reactions ranged from shock to barely contained anger at how their former commander had been treated. The gate area, usually quiet and routine, had become a scene of unexpected drama. Colonel Patterson approached Arthur with quick strides, extending his hand. "General Brooks, I am profoundly sorry. This should never have happened. Private Chen will face disciplinary action and will be reviewing our gate procedures immediately." But Arthur raised his hand gently. "Tom, there's no need for discipline. The private was following his training, perhaps too rigidly, but his heart was in the right place. What happened here is a teaching moment, not a court-martial offense." He turned to address the small crowd that had gathered. "All of you know me, or know of me. But this young man didn't. And why should he? I'm retired. I'm not important anymore in the day-to-day operations of this base. What is important is that we learn from this." Arthur looked back at Marcus, who still stood rigidly at attention, his face pale. "Private Chen, you're going to have a long career ahead of you if you take this lesson to heart. Respect isn't about rank insignia or uniforms. It's about recognizing the humanity and dignity in every person you encounter. The next elderly person who comes to this gate might be a Medal of Honor recipient, or they might be a Gold Star parent coming to visit their child's memorial, or they might be a homeless veteran who just needs directions to the VA hospital. Treat them all with the same respect you'd show me right now. Can you do that?" Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, sir. I swear it, sir." Arthur nodded, then turned to Linda. "Now, I believe I'm already late for a ceremony. Shall we?" As they walked toward the waiting vehicle, Arthur could hear Colonel Patterson quietly speaking with Marcus, not berating him but explaining, teaching, ensuring the lesson was learned. The memorial ceremony proceeded as planned, and Arthur stood among other veterans, some in uniform, some in civilian clothes, all of them united in honoring those who had fallen. Several people whispered about what had happened at the gate, the story spreading quickly through the military community. After the ceremony, as Arthur was preparing to leave, Marcus appeared, having been relieved from gate duty. He approached hesitantly, stopping a respectful distance away. "General Brooks, sir, may I speak with you?" Arthur turned, surprised but nodding. "Of course, Private." Marcus stepped closer, his words coming in a rush. "Sir, I've been thinking about what you said, about respect and dignity. My father was in the army, served in Desert Storm. He died when I was 10, and I barely remember him, but I remember my mother talking about how proud he was to serve, how much it meant to him, and today I realized that if someone had treated my father the way I treated you, if someone had dismissed his service, refused to see who he really was," his voice broke. "I'm ashamed, sir. Not just because you're a general, but because I forgot what service means. I forgot that the uniform isn't what makes someone worthy of respect. I'm so sorry." Arthur placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. "Your father would be proud of you, Marcus. Not because you're perfect, but because you're willing to learn. You're willing to grow. That's all any of us can ask." Over the following weeks, something changed at that base. Marcus Chen became known not for his mistake, but for his transformation. He treated every person who approached his gate with careful respect, took extra time to verify credentials when needed, and never again judged someone based on their appearance. He kept a small note in his pocket, something he'd written after that day, reminding himself of General Brooks's words. Other soldiers heard the story and took it to heart. Gate procedures were updated not to be less secure, but to be more respectful, including protocols for properly verifying retired personnel and ensuring that civilian-clothed veterans were treated with appropriate dignity. Colonel Patterson established a new training program focused on the human element of security, using Arthur's experience as a teaching case. Arthur himself returned to his quiet life, but he received dozens of letters from soldiers who had heard the story, thanking him not just for his service, but for the grace he had shown in that moment of disrespect. One letter from Marcus's mother brought tears to his eyes. She wrote that her son had called her that evening, telling her about the general and that for the first time since his father's death, she had heard real purpose and understanding in his voice. 3 months later, Marcus received orders for advanced training. Before he left, he returned to the base one final time to see Arthur, who had agreed to meet him at the memorial where the original ceremony had taken place. "Sir, I wanted to thank you before I shipped out," Marcus said, standing before the memorial wall with Arthur beside him. "You changed my life that day. You could have had me disciplined, removed, destroyed my career. Instead, you taught me what it really means to serve." Arthur smiled, looking at the names etched in the stone before them. "These men and women here, Marcus, they're why we serve. They're why respect matters. Every single person you encounter might be carrying a burden you can't see, might have sacrificed something you can't imagine. Your job, my job, all of our jobs, is to honor that, to see beyond the surface, to remember that dignity is not earned by appearance but inherent in service and humanity." They stood together in silence for a long moment, two soldiers separated by generations but united by a simple truth learned the hard way. Respect isn't given because of rank or uniform. It's given because it's right, because every person has a story, because the measure of a society, and especially a military, is how it treats those who can no longer demand respect but who have always deserved it. If you believe that true service is measured not by the uniform we wear, but by the respect we show, subscribe to this channel. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Type honor in the comments if you believe respect should be given freely, not earned through appearances.